Ivonne Yanna is a good friend and an Ecuadorian environmentalist and the founding member of Acción Ecológica, which is a well-known Ecuadorian environmental organization, and is also a founder of the international network Oil Watch, which supports resistance to oil companies' activities in tropical countries. Ivonne is a biologist and holds master's degree in international relations and has published several books and articles on a number of environmental topics, and today she's the South American Secretariat of Oil Watch. And we've asked her to talk briefly about the experience of the Yasuni ITT project, which is a project in Ecuador, and what the successes and challenges have been of that model of doing commons protection around oil fields as a common to keep oil in the ground. And so, Ivonne, we see your presentation now, and you should be unmuted. So I'll pass it over to you, and I'll give you a little heads up at 7 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, can I start?
Please do.
Okay, thank you, Janet, for the invitation. And first of all, I always ask for apologize me because of my English. You know, I make a huge effort to try to transmit all our ideas that I think in Spanish, and I try to talk in English, so maybe it will be a little bit confusing. So this is why I wrote some of the ideas that I was going to speak in my presentation right down in English. So I will start saying that this short presentation will be divided in three parts. A background, short background of the Yasuni. Most of you probably know what it's about, but just one slide about. Then an outline of the proposal, of what we call in Spanish los fundamentos de la propuesta, and then taking stock, trying to answer the questions that Janet asked me to answer. So the first is, of course, the background of the proposal, where the Yasuni proposal comes from. It comes from the inspiration that we had as Oil Watch on the resistance of the local communities against the damages of the oil activities in their lands and territories. We asked them to call for a moratorium. I remember that in 1997, at the same time that the Kyoto Protocols was being written and approved, we were calling for a moratorium to oil activities as the only way to fight climate change. And then we move on to the energy sovereignty demand. And of course, in 2004 and 2005, the eco-call, the El Llamado Ecológico, was the first formal Yasuni proposal that was presented in the Convention of Biodiversity and also in the climate change negotiations in Buenos Aires. And just to remember you that the Yasuni National Park that is referring the Yasuni proposal is in the eastern part of Ecuador and is surrounded by the Yasuni Biosphere Reserve. And of course, it contains this biosphere also the indigenous territory of the Guarani nationality in Ecuador. And as you can see in the right, is a map made by Matt Finner. He's a very well-known biologist. He proved with several figures that the Yasuni is probably one of the most biodiverse parts in South America and in the world. And the proposal is very simple. It means that we want to leave the oil in the soil to start a post-oil Ecuador as a first step toward a post-oil civilization. It's very simple, very clear, very pure. And the outline, los fundamentos of this proposal are divided, I think that in four. First of all, the Yasuni proposal allow us to develop new arguments against the petro-capitalism. And how? Of course, saying that we have to preserve biodiversity and to respect the rights of indigenous people that have created this biodiversity. This helps us to say that we are going to protect the climate locally and globally, not only avoiding the destruction of the forest, but also, no, I am not going to say avoid. We are not going to extract oil that will be burned and become CO2 emissions. And also, this allows us to question the energy that feeds petro-capitalism and create the crisis of accumulation that is the father of all the crises. I am not saying the mother, I say the father of all the crises. And also this allows us to discuss the common but differentiated responsibilities, not only in terms of climate change, but in terms to take collectively decisions and to generate conditions to escape of this extractivist model. And of course, this makes us to build the basis to have territories free of oil. The second part of the los fundamentos of the outline in English means to defend life, to defend the land, and to defend territories. And I want to stop here because you talk about commons. That for us in Ecuador and in America Latina means probably a different thing that we were talking here about. For us, commons could be probably related with what we understand as territories. That they are not only spaces of land or pieces of land, but means the life of the people that lives there, their cultures, their interactions, and etc., and the future, of course. And the Yasuni proposal means to defend these territories, or so-called commons. No? And of course, why we think that the Yasuni will prevent and defend these territories? Because we know what already happened with the Texaco case. We know exactly what it means to have an Ecuador extracting oil. And of course, you have that the Texaco is a very famous case. Now Texaco will soon declare guilty. And we don't want to repeat this experience with the rest of the Amazonia. So this is why the Yasuni proposal will defend these territories of indigenous peoples, these commons in Ecuador, and of course in other parts of the world. I think even that if Yasuni means not extract oil and not to burn it, that we do, the Yasuni proposal is also protecting the atmosphere as a commons. I mean, a different type of protections or different type of commons. And yes, I think that, I don't know what, I have already spoke 10 minutes, or 5 minutes, 7 minutes.
You've got about 3 minutes left.
Okay, sure. So I am going to go to this part of the taken stock. And first of all, that any new or any transformer idea that comes bottom up from the communities or from social organizations, etc. It exists as a real and true politics. Takes it in their hands, because before 2000 proposal, of course, was what is happening is that, of course, the government is very, the government has people inside. And in the case of the Yasuni proposal, the fish initiative so we have to understand, but even despite of it, we think that is a success is that for the Ecuadorian society, the Yasuni proposal is probably one of the best proposals that was presented by the government, but also if you make polls, almost 70% of the Ecuadorians want to keep the oil in the soil. So it's a success in this sense. But what hasn't worked? And I think that it hasn't worked because of two things. One has to do with, as mentioning, that these people, neoclassic economic people in the government, that mixture idea of the Yasuni proposal with carbon markets. And this in different ways, including this in the trust fund, including this in the Ecuadorian position in the international negotiations on climate change, etc. But we were reflecting today, what would have we have done differently? First of all, I think that it was a huge mistake of us, myself, to promote this idea, the Yasuni proposal, in the international negotiations. I think that we should separate completely what has to do with climate change and with the Yasuni proposal. Maybe it was a strategic mistake. We should work more with local authorities, because if we want to do this something, we need to work with the authorities where the proposal should be taking place. And of course, we have to insist on the ecological debt reparation, and not necessarily to ask for the contribution of the international community to make the success of this proposal. And finally, the last slide is what should be done. First of all, here in Ecuador, we should push for a popular consultation. So the Ecuadorian must to decide if the oil must be kept underground or not. We are already replicating this idea in other countries, and soon, even in Rio+20, we are going already to launch the other initiatives similar to the Yasuni in other countries, in Guatemala, Colombia, Bolivia. And finally, we have to strengthen the alliances with the international movements, because without the international movement of oil workers, without alliance, or without an alliance with the campesinos, or without the alliance with other social movements, the possibility to have different Yasunis all over the world will be more difficult. So this is what I wanted to share with you, and I hope that it was clear, and I am ready for questions. Thank you.